like your fatigue's like 99. I'm like, I wonder if I get my fatigue to 100, I wonder if I get my fatigue to, 120, well, I wonder if I'll die if it goes above 100, or, so it's like, it's just not almost, it's not like going, hang on a minute, like I'm really tired, like my fatigue is like right up there. It's like, no, I wonder,
how far
can we push it?
Today's guest, Colin is an author. He's a long-time entrepreneur, and he's also a lifetime athlete. And this is a fascinating chat about those different elements of sport that perhaps aren't so positive, and how you can take those forward into other areas of your life, and how they can have a negative impact. So are you someone that's worked yourself to a standstill, that has experienced burnout or complete exhaustion in your working life? This episode is going to be fantastic for you to start peeling back the layers and start mapping out a structure that's going to help you move forward, so you can get more balance and grounding in your life. Enjoy. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Hey, Colin, how are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Great.
Coming from the other side of the world, we're just having a bit of a joke about the change of seasons. I'm heading into cold, which I'm not loving, but you are excited because of the longer days.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to the rain stopping. It's been a wet one recently.
Yeah, whereabouts in the UK are
you? Basically in the Midlands, so in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
Just moved to a little village a couple of months ago, a place called Ravensthorpe. It's a really small little village, so yeah, really loving it there.
Yeah, nice. I got family up there, Midlands. Now I'm forgetting, so I'll just move on. It'll come. It'll come to me. Very good. Now, you grew up in Zimbabwe, right?
Yeah.
So was sport a big part of your life as a youngster?
Yeah, definitely. Like I actually find it quite hard to comprehend sport like in the UK, because at school, we were like, sport was compulsory for a start. So we always had to play, some kind of sport after school. So we finished school and then we'd play sport in the afternoon, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we had quite there was stuff that we had to do. So we had to do athletics, and we had to choose either hockey or cricket, in the winter, and or rugby, or I can't remember now, football, etc., those sort of things. But we had, a number of sports, and swimming and that sort of thing. So yeah, we had to play sport, and lots of different options. But that was just part of the culture almost.
Yeah.
And I find it quite strange in this country, where it's not really part of it as such. It's kind of something you can do, but it's not compulsory.
Yeah, and I found when I was traveling in the UK in '98 that seemed to have most in common with the people from South Africa and Zimbabwe, because of that same sort of cultural aspect of growing up and sport. Obviously, there's cultural differences, but just from that perspective, I can relate, because how you described your childhood was the same as it for most people's experience here in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to say it's probably the same for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be something to do with the weather that you were talking about.
Probably a lot to do with the weather.
And the fact that I remember a mate of mine lives over there, and he was talking about we have to do training on the morning of the game because there are no afternoons where the sun's out for football. And it's like, wow, yeah, completely different way of looking at it. So do you have a really positive childhood memory of sport that sort of comes flooding back at different times?
Well, that's the story. I'm addicted to sport.
Yeah.
But I've always said to myself, there's worse things to be addicted to. So, and I guess, and I would say, that sport really saved my life. I didn't have a great childhood, and we don't need to go too much into it, but certainly discovering sport, and I think that gave me a lot of freedom to get out there and train and to take a bit of control back and do my own thing, and just definitely be in control of something in my life, and being able to train hard and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Now, we won't get into the details, but are you okay to talk about through that lens of that, like
Yeah,
feeling out of control? Like,
yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
so is that just something that you remember from a young age that you felt that sort of sense of not being in control?
Yeah, so my father was quite overbearing, I guess, is a way of putting it.
Yeah.
So I suffered from depression, because depression essentially comes from a sense of powerlessness. This is stuff I've only learned quite, in the last few years.
Yeah.
And because I had that sense of powerlessness, that, he was very strict and very kind of, yeah, I guess overbearing is the right word for it. Yeah, I didn't really have many choices. You have to do this, this, and this, and you have to be a certain way and act a certain way. And you didn't really have much freedom, etc. But definitely getting that sport really gave me that freedom to do something on my own, and yeah, just get out on the bike for a few hours or something. That was really, yeah.
Yeah. And this is a recurring theme so far with the interviews that I've done, is that sport, for most of us that had some challenges with who we were and the different aspects of our life, sport was like a sanctuary.
Yeah.
It was like an escape, and because of that, it was one positive place that taught us so much. So can you think of some of those early lessons that you learned in sport that you weren't getting elsewhere?
Um, I guess that there's some things about sport, again, which I've only learned quite recently, about like what some I guess kind of negative things. So really, the biggest thing about my sport really was, because I guess I was battling my inner demons, but wearing myself out gave me a real sense of contentment and a good feeling, basically, because I was too tired to think, essentially.
Interesting. Interesting.
So I would push myself really hard. I would train really hard. Um, I have regret in terms of, I think I could have been a much better athlete if I had been more specific in my
Yeah.
training
Yeah.
and rested more. Because I was one of those people that was really good at training, and I'd make everyone else hurt in training. But in
Yeah.
the race situation, it didn't always translate.
Interesting.
Um, so yeah, that was just one thing that I wish, and the other thing as well, kind of thinking back on it, certainly from a cycling perspective, was that we didn't really have many coaches or anybody really kind of going, yeah, this is what you need to do, and giving us more direction. And I think that's a real pity, especially in that environment, because the older kind of guys in the cycling, everything else, they more saw us as competition. It was more of a competition than it was, okay, let's teach you, and let's try and, we had one guy, a guy called Tim Jones, who turned pro, actually. I mean, it was a while ago now. He was a really good cyclist, but that, for me, that would have been a better drive to go, let's try and get Zimbabwe on the map, and let's try and get some pro cyclists out of this, because there was a bunch of strong guys that were really good athletes, very determined and very ambitious. But I just think we just lacked a bit of that kind of skill and training kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think most of us who've had any sort of athletic ability look back at times of our life and wonder, what if, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the reality is that only a small percentage go on to the next level. And then again, then it narrows even further
yeah,
to the next level and the next level. But there's always that thought of what if.
yeah.
So was Was cycling the one area, or were there other sports that you had a gift for, or was it really that endurance aspect that was the thing that
It was, so I did triathlon as well. So I did like quite short course triathlon. So we had like a series of mini triathlons. So it was I think it was like a 400-meter swim, like a 12K bike, and a 3K run. So those are really good fun. And I think we actually used to do like a cycle race first thing in the morning, and then go and do the triathlon afterwards, or something like that. So
wow.
we were quite we were really active in that sort of things. Um, I think I like the cycling. It's hard to say, but I think I like the history of cycling, and cycling's got a lot of history, and a lot of, you've got these Paris-Roubaix, the Tour de France, and all these races which have been
Yeah.
around for over 100 years, and there's
Yeah.
something really kind of magical about that, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting because I remember seeing triathlon on the telly once when I was really young, before I'd even done it, and it's just that thing when you just see something, and it's like it just kind of ignites a
Capture.
spark,
Yeah.
and then the next minute you're actually doing it, or something like that. It's quite interesting how that sort of happens.
Yeah, and I might be coming from a bit of bias. I worked at 18 years in sports television, but yeah, I was always captured by that. I'd find myself, so the tour would come on late here
Yeah,
for a couple of hours, and it was just mesmerizing. You should be
yeah,
going to bed, but you like somehow you just couldn't turn it off. And then
yeah,
particularly when you're going through some of those towns and some of that amazing scenery,
yeah.
um, and then like is it the Paris Roubaix that does the cobblestones
That's
every
right.
year? Yeah, yeah, and that because again it's the history of it, and
Yeah,
that the familiar tones of Phil Liggett.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
grew up with Phil Liggett and him
yeah,
and his tones. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, very cool.
And
Um,
I think as well, like the friends that we had that we cycled with, we all spoke about cycling and all that sort of thing. So it was all just that environment around that.
and you've already mentioned one person that was an influence, but did you have a hero in cycling that you used to watch, that whether it was that closer to home or on TV or anything that you sort of aspired to be like?
Um, there was a triathlete, the guy who used to win all the races, Mark Marabini. And I think what I really liked about Mark was I guess just that confidence that he was always going to win, kind of thing. He just had that there was something about that, almost like rocking up to a race, and not having to worry, not being nervous, and that sort of thing. Just knowing that, it's like being not overtrained, but it's being like really well prepared for a race, which is well within your means. So you've
Yep.
got no worries in actually doing it full out and everything else. And it's that kind of feeling, almost, that that's something quite inspiring to aim for.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were really good in the training, but then sometimes in competition you were the opposite.
Yeah.
So was it the confidence element, or did your body let you down in competition?
Honestly, I think I did it for the wrong reasons. I think I did sport for the wrong reasons, and the reason was twofold. The reason was firstly to punish myself, because that was my mindset, and that was those belief systems about not being good enough and all that sort of thing. So I enjoyed punishing myself. And I don't know if that was also a way just to try and improve myself. There's always these things you tell yourself in order to kind of get better, that you kind of deserve to suffer, and you're kind of pushing yourself hard. And like I said already, it was really about, the object was to wear myself out,
Mm.
and it wasn't my whole, okay, like my goal was to be triathlon world champion. Like that's what I wanted to do. That's what drove me. That's what I trained a lot for. But the reality was that I didn't really have that mindset, that winning mindset going. Like today, like we got a race on the weekend. We raced a lot, so it was like most weekends kind of thing. But I didn't really have that winning mindset going, okay, firstly, what do I have to do to win? And secondly, like I really want to win today. Like and I know I explored a lot of stuff in terms of mindset and that sort of thing, and the state of mind that you go into a race and that sort of thing. But it wasn't, when I look at other like Greg Bennett, for example. I don't know if you know Greg Bennett, but he's a triathlete, yeah. And like they did everything, him and his wife did everything they could to win, and diet, massage, etc. And they were like, we got to put 100% in, and the goal is to win as many races as possible and to obviously make money and all the rest of it. And I don't think I had that. I didn't have that. I really want to win. It was more about I just want to push myself. I want to race hard. I want to, it wasn't that winning mindset.
It's really interesting that you say that. I was just having a conversation with my wife last night about motivation and recalling a moment from my coach in football. I must have been mid-20s, and we're in a bit of a slump, and he just said, "Oh, what motivates you?" And everyone went around the room to talk about it. And for me, it was like, I don't want to let anyone down. And a realization since that time, how much that's driven me in lots of different areas. Not necessarily a healthy way at different times.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating how that same aspect that drives us in sport also crosses over to other areas. So do you see a crossover? Like, clearly it helped you to be fit and to quiet your mind in certain ways. But that same driver, does that still show up, or has it showed up at different times in other parts of your life as well?
It definitely showed up in my work. So I worked very hard as well. So I'd work long hours and yeah, I mean, when I came to this country, I was doing 90 hours a week for like 2 years. So yeah, I definitely had that same kind of mindset of being an athlete and working hard and pushing yourself, and the same in work, pushing yourself. I'm definitely not a 9-to-5 person. I'd work an extra 2 hours just to prove that I'm not a 9-to-5 person, So yeah, that definitely crossed over and that side of things, and doing whatever it takes, and and not shying away from anything. And there's definitely a crossover in that, and it toughens you up. I think there's a lot of certainly in cycling, and when you're cycling out in the rain and the wind and different weather conditions and everything else, and you're riding, and there's a lot of suffering involved in riding at mountains and hills or in the heat. There's so many different conditions, and there's a lot of suffering involved in that. And I think that anything else you do that stretches your comfort zone. So other stuff that you do, it's like, well, I'm not 100 k's from home, and got one water bottle and half a Snickers bar, and so that pales into significance. Other stuff, nothing's going to be as hard as that.
Yeah, and I'm sort of struck by this part of the conversation to think how many men are driven the same way still, and actually what they're trying to do is wear themselves out to stop the overthinking.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a lot of that, and again, stuff that I've realized more recently is it's all about distractions. It's and unfortunately, that's where alcohol comes into it. That's where binge watching TV. Everything is these man-made distractions to keep us almost from looking in the mirror, almost from dealing with our own thoughts and emotions and that sort of thing. It's like that, a form of escapism, just to go out and I still train really hard now, but it's more, so I'm very data driven. So I've got my Garmin watch and an Aura ring, because I had a history of overtraining. So I would train maybe 8 months and then I would just completely break, because I'm very self-motivated. So if I'm not motivated, then something's drastically wrong.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'd basically do, my endurance stuff, and then I would just break essentially, and then I'd go into the gym and train in the gym, and then so I'd change, and then I'd train in the gym until I injured something or broke, then, and then I'd get back into the endurance stuff and do that, and it's like a cycle basically. It was a cycle. So now I'm a lot more just focused on analyzing the data, and I'm a lot older now as well, so that comes into it. So
Yeah,
I probably, I'll train hard every second day and have that day's rest, and
yeah.
just try and listen to my body a lot more than just pushing day in and day out.
Yeah, we certainly mature from that perspective, and I don't know if
Yeah,
you've had that thought where you look back and go, "I wish I'd known this when I was younger," and that would have certainly helped, right?
yeah, yeah. Definitely, that data analysis would have helped in terms of
Yeah,
just. And the problem is your ego overtakes you as well, because it's almost like, for me, like your fatigue's like 99. I'm like, I wonder if I get my fatigue to 100. I wonder if I get my fatigue to 120. Well, I wonder if I'll die if it goes above 100, or so it's like, it's just not, almost, it's not like going, hang on a minute, like I'm really tired, like my fatigue is like right up there. It's like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I wonder,
How
how
far
far can
can
we
I
push
push
it?
myself? I laugh because I've probably done the same thing, not directly, just but that's kind of been the mindset. It's like,
Yeah,
I'm beat here, but I'll just keep going, and
yeah,
I'll get to this particular moment. And
yeah,
you mentioned before that you would have really benefited from having a proper coach, and the data, and the
yeah.
analysis and all those different things. When did you get your first coach that had a meaningful, positive impact on your life?
I had a swimming coach from quite young age. So I swam at school, and then I had a swimming coach as well. So that side of things, I always had a coach. Um, I don't think I really ever had a coach as in my prime kind of thing. I never had a coach in that time. I had a running coach when I was in this country, and that was really like that was incredible, because honestly, like, having been running for, I don't know, 20 years kind of thing almost, and then going to a track and literally having to learn how to run was
Again.
was like really, I don't even know if the word is humbling, but it was just really bizarre almost. Because we were like doing sprints and things, and like I couldn't. I'm 6'7", so I'm like a giant spider anyway. you know,
Yeah.
it was really, yeah, it was really interesting. Just having to learn to run was the first thing. But that, yeah. So from a running perspective, we used to run on the track every Tuesday, Thursday night, basically, and a little group of us. And one of the most rewarding things, and something that really, I really appreciated, was that we'd do intervals, like 600 meters, 800 meters, whatever it is, whatever kind of intervals on the track, and they'd be flat out, and like, it's something that you didn't think you could do. You didn't think you could do one, let alone two or three or four or five,
Yeah.
and you'd still do it. And you get to like four, and it's like, yeah, there's one more, and you just, like, your brain would be like, we can't do this, and then you just run, and then you just do it, and then you've done the session kind of thing. And that was really like, that was just so rewarding, to do something that you honestly didn't think you could do, and
Yeah.
that was really, that really translates into real life about stuff. We do cold water swimming, and as it probably gets colder here, in Australia.
That I believe.
So yeah, I got to about 5 degrees this winter. But so we used to swim. We swam for quite a few years in the winter as well, but in a wetsuit. Anyway, uh, my wife and a friend of ours, so there's three of us that go swimming, and she was like, "Yeah, I think we should try without the wetsuit and just see what we can do." And like, we used to look at other people without wetsuits on, going like, "You are mental. Like,
Yeah.
like what
Proper.
the hell is wrong? You are mental. How can you get in there? It's like, it's freezing."
Yeah.
And then we were doing it. And it's like, it's so amazing, like the stuff you can actually do when you got your mindset right, and just go like, yeah. And that's rewarding in itself. Like, it's actually quite exhausting if I'm honest, but you know, every time you go to the water's edge and like I actually dive in, it's like 5 degrees and I dive in the water because I just think it's like quicker to get it over with. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but the stuff that goes on in your head as you stand at the water's edge, and it's just like, and literally as I'm diving through the air, my brain's screaming at me, going, "What the
No.
no!" I was like, it's too late. I'll stop my watch. I'm like going in.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, keep going.
but yeah, that again is like, it's incredible what you can achieve, and
Yeah.
that's definitely helped my wife a lot in terms of, she's scared of heights, and we've done stuff where, she's walked over a really high bridge and that sort of stuff, and really, it just really shows you like this stuff's just in your head, and that you can really, you can do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you develop your mindset, the
Mm,
capability is incredible. I'm a bit late to that sort of cold immersion type thing, and
yeah,
I started doing it after my runs, having a cold shower, and the conversations are the same. It's nothing compared to diving into 5 degrees, but
yeah,
it's still the same mentally having to prepare yourself, and sometimes yelling at yourself internally in a way that
yeah,
perhaps you wouldn't get away with
yeah,
externally. But come on, like, get in there. And but like you described, it's amazing what the body does to adapt. And I know,
yeah,
like those who are familiar with Wim Hof would have seen a lot of his work, and how we've become pretty soft
mm,
around how we nurture our body too much to the point it stopped being able to regulate.
yeah,
But it's not just in that cold space, right, where we can actually push the limits. And what I love is how you talked about how that achievement that we get through sport, the reward that we
mm,
feel when we increase our competence, when we reach another level. If we look at the rest of our life the same way, and we start looking at it from, well, what athlete mindset can I adopt here in this particular area to be able to get myself to the next level so I can feel that same reward. And you
yeah.
mentioned that it's transferable. Is there a particular area for you where you've been able to take that and really push the boundaries of what you're capable of?
Um, I think, yeah, it's just everything almost. It's just like, even like going for a really long drive, or driving a long way. And it's just like, it's just putting yourself in that mindset, going, because it's different perspective, isn't it? Like for one person, 2 hours is a long drive. For another person, 9 hours is a long drive, or what. And in Australia, it's mental because it's like,
Yeah.
the next farm's like 3,000 kilometers away. That was really. I watched a program about these. This guy literally drove. They were doing this dog thing, and he drove around the country, dropping the
I was
dogs
just
off.
I was just watching that the other day.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it was like his driveway is 100 kilometers long.
but he must have driven like 8,000 kilometers around Australia or something, like dropping these dogs off. It's just,
Crazy.
you can't
Yeah.
even imagine it.
I guess the difference is we're getting a bit sidetracked, but
Yeah,
the roads, because when you go to the UK and you drive and you go, oh, it's
yeah,
just up there, you go, well, that should be pretty quick. And it's like, well, the motorways are often clogged, and
yeah,
the other streets aren't like 100 Ks or 50 or
yeah.
60 miles an hour. They're like little windy roads where they're not particularly built for two cars in some
No,
places. And
exactly.
so
Yeah,
nothing's
yeah,
necessarily quick. So a long drive, perspective, right? It's all
yeah.
relative.
Yeah, because you've got like long straight roads, whereas the motorways can be challenging, and you've got to be, you can't be half asleep or anything like that. There's a lot of traffic on the road, so yeah, you've got to be on your game.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's just one example, I think, of um, and I guess I think I'm just trying to think of examples in work and that sort of thing, but there's a lot of that teaches. I think once you've run your own business as well, that that you can go anywhere and start a business, and I think that's very empowering as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
You know, that you always have that ability to do anything. You know, if I have to go somewhere and I have to move furniture or I have to pack shelves, you know, I'll do whatever it takes to get
Yeah.
to where I want to get to.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what it is, isn't it?
and
Do
I
it every
think a
time.
lot of people won't do that, especially if they've been to a place where maybe they're earning good money or something like that. For even though they're unhappy,
Yeah.
for them to take a step back and go, actually, like this is all I need, or you know, to go to move to a different country, and you know, things like that. Because I think that's another big thing. You know, for me moving to the UK, I literally had two people that I knew that had moved to the UK before me, and I had like 200 quid in my wallet kind of thing, and I moved to the UK, um, and that was it. I had my working visa, but I knew two people. I couldn't get hold of either of them when I got here, so I was like, okay, well, I just got to you know, find somewhere to stay. Um, but yeah, I think it's just that can-do attitude, you know. And I would definitely employ people as well. For me, if someone's been in sport or something like that, especially in martial arts. I did do
Yeah.
martial arts as a youngster, but that again, there's a lot of discipline in that, and there's a lot of that drive and ambition in people who have a sporting background, and that definitely translates to work.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you had that swimming coach that
Yeah,
was what was it that that swimming coach gave you that you weren't getting elsewhere? What was it that really lifted you up?
it was structure. Yeah, it was structure both in terms of an exact time to go swimming and a program, what exactly we were going to do in that session. Uh, I literally have 100% failure rate in me deciding to get on the bike and have an easy ride. I have 100% failure rate of never managing to actually ride easy by myself.
It's really interesting that you say that as well, because I was talking to a mate of mine who runs, and he's quick is quick, but I was
Yeah,
watching his training runs on Strava, and it's like he's really quite slow, and I'm
yeah,
like, I asked him like, what's that about? And he was talking about this new science around endurance, and biathletes in particular, they need to be able to slow themselves down, and how you can actually build up speed by going slower. And I'm like you, I'm like high intensity, just
yeah,
go as hard as you can. And but eventually the body fatigues over a long period of time. You described it before, your body kind of lets
yes,
you down. It's actually
yeah,
screaming out for you to stop.
yeah,
And instead having to slow down. And I was sort of back and forth with him after the first few runs. I'm like, I'm finding this really difficult
mm.
to run slowly. And it made me realize what a great metaphor that is for the rest of my life at different times.
It definitely, you know, that's the big thing for me is really about everything is about slowing down, and I have so many nudges around that, especially as I've got older. Is about everything is about slowing down because I'm just 100 miles an hour. I've got ADHD as well, so that doesn't help. But you know, I'm just doing everything. I'm, you know, just working full out, training full out. You know, just it's just full gas all the time, and it's definitely that thing about slowing down is. And I think as well as if I could have done those long, slower rides, if I could have trained, because I tended to train hard but not long. You know, so you do like you might go for a 2 hour really hard ride,
Yeah.
which is really taxing.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if I'd done a 5 hour ride, it would probably have made me a better athlete. You know, the lower intensity, or even more than that. But yeah, that would have helped my winning side of things if I had been able to actually slow down and go, okay, we're doing a long ride today and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's that structure you talked about before that's
Mm.
just so important in so many different areas. And having that outside voice to just to bounce ideas off and give
Yeah,
you a change of perspective, because we can get so caught in our ways of, well, this is how it's got to be. I'm high intensity, so that's how I'm going to do it.
yeah,
Um, Now, often it takes a significant setback to to sort of wake us up and make us look at things, but often through the sporting lens, we've just done it because we've had to. So I was going to ask a few other questions around what we just talked about, but I'm going to go on this tangent because it's come up. You mentioned that you had a pretty tough upbringing, and you said basically experiencing PTSD your whole life.
Yeah.
But was there a later event that sort of shocked you into, because you mentioned you've only been learning this stuff in the last few years, which is often the case when we have something unfolds in our life and then we start looking for answers.
Yeah.
So was there an event for you that sort of unfolded that got you looking at life a different way?
There wasn't necessarily an event. It was just this knowing that there's got to be a better way. It's like life can't be this hard.
Yeah, right.
And it was that.
What was hard though? What was going on that was feeling so hard?
I think it was just having that PTSD and being in depression, and I think it was the suffering. So I was almost like choosing to suffer in terms of, training hard and that sort of thing. But actually suffering made up quite a big part of my life almost. And you get to, you're working hard, you're training hard, you're depressed, and my depression was a cycle. So I'd be good for 2 weeks, and then I'd be like really bad for maybe 5 weeks or something like that. So I'd go through that depression, those cycles. But actually I was comfortable with that. I was like, okay, we're fine-ish. We're going to come out the other end, and then we'll be good, and then, we'll happen again.
Yeah.
And I think the issue is that suffering is comfortable because it's known. So we get into that habit almost of suffering, and because it's a known feeling, and it's like I understand this, I understand how to suffer.
It's familiar.
It's familiar. It's good. I'm in this known. Your ego says, yeah, this is my known place. We're good to go. But yeah, it's just that. It's just, and I think relationships as well. That was another issue. Just going through, and I don't know if the word, just not having good relationships almost, just struggling in relationships, and definitely anger. I think, I don't know if I don't know if suppressed anger is the right word, but that being angry all the time, you kind of almost get a bit sick of it, and I think that was, just going like, there's got to be a better way. Like it can't be this. Surely this isn't life. And I think it's also looking at other people and going, look, these guys look happy or whatever, or they're doing really well, or they're really successful, or something, or they're really, happily married, and and it's like, and I know, you can see the face of stuff when there's something else is going on behind closed doors, but
yes, yeah,
it's still just looking at that and going like, why can't I have that? Like what's kind of wrong almost.
Yeah. So much gold through all of that. The comfort in the suffering, like it becomes so familiar, as you described, that it's almost like, well, that's better than something uncertain.
Because we fear the unknown. So the unknown, the irony is the unknown was where the gold is.
Yes.
That's where the real gold is, because that's where you expand and you move forward and everything else. But we're also, our ego kind of thing is also scared of the unknown, because it's like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's behind that door.
Yeah. And it's why being curious, as you described, and starting looking for answers is so powerful.
Yeah.
You mentioned the anger. A lot of people don't necessarily associate with anger before they do a bit of understanding of themselves. And in fact, they're resistant to being labeled that way because it's got such a stigma.
Yeah.
But they know at different times it bubbles to the surface. And that was a real driver for me as well. It's like, I'm sick of coming home from work and being angry around the people that I should be the nicest to. And that's that long-term impact of things like PTSD or grief or anything else. And it doesn't mean you're an angry person. It just means, like everyone else, you've got emotions that need to be able to come out at different times. So what steps have you taken? Because I imagine that you've got much better at that, just even the fact that you're able to bring it up.
Yeah.
What sort of steps have you taken that people can learn off around how to maybe process their anger in a healthier way that doesn't involve riding at full intensity for 5 hours as well?
Well, you get back from your ride, you're lying there half dead.
Yeah.
You've only had 1 Mars bar. So it's really an understanding, and so there's a guy called William Whitecloud who actually lived in Australia for a long time, and it's really his kind of modality around the stuff that he teaches, etc. And he's written a couple of books, etc. And that just really resonated with me, and it's in the understanding. So the understanding is that, or the reality is that anger comes from fear. So the underlying emotion of anger is fear. So now when you can deal with the truth and go, actually, I'm angry because I'm scared of something, and what am I scared of? Then you can start to deal with truth and go, okay, so it could be anything. It could be I'm scared of failure. I'm scared of screwing up my relationship. I'm scared of saying the wrong thing. I'm scared of losing everything I've got. I'm scared of beating someone up and going to jail. All these things but it's understanding that it comes from fear. And I think that's very difficult for you. Try and tell an angry guy that he's scared.
Yeah.
It won't end well. But that's the reality, is that it comes from fear. And it's in that understanding that, okay, it's just a reaction. And I think also, I read another book, I read a lot of books, The Chimp Paradox, and he's Steve Peters, I think his name is. So he's trained he's coached a lot of people, top athletes, cyclists, and the snooker player, Ronnie O'Sullivan, etc.
Yeah.
And that really resonated because he said, well, you've got a chimp and a human, and your chimp's reacting first to a situation. The chimp goes, to whatever reaction is happening, and then your human takes over and says, oh, actually, hold on a minute, maybe we've misread this or something else. Sometimes that's too late, because now your chimp's already made a mess of it's caused chaos already. So there's a problem that's caused or whatever, but it's just, and I've gone a lot deeper than that now, but the initial thing was going, okay, that's my chimp just reacting to things. And it's just when you can frame stuff up and you can see what's going on, and you can start to almost label stuff and go, okay, so my chimp's reacting to this thing. So now what do I do to change, to tame my chimp and make sure that he doesn't get in there first when there's a situation or something like that?
Oh, that's good. I like that. And you're the second guest in quick succession that's mentioned that book. So for me, that's a message that I need to get a hold of it and read it. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned having to teach your body to run again in a different environment. And having gone through an experience like that myself, where I was getting injured and it turns out that I was using the wrong part of my legs to run, and having to retrain my mind to use hamstrings and glutes that just didn't want to switch on. Again, there's so much like having to go back to being incompetent. That's what it felt like. And the learning through that of just stick to the process. Like, you've been given, sorry, dog just getting a bit excited. You've been given clear instructions from someone who knows what they're talking about. Just relax and just keep working through the process and keep working through the process. To me, that was such a great life lesson.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, exactly that, while I let the dog out, around how that retraining yourself, that you've been able to do the same thing in other areas of your life.
So I think, bizarrely, a lot of times I I don't really have an ego at times in certain situations. And both in terms of business and in terms of having to change my running and that sort of thing. Like I think I'm very open to learning. I'm definitely open to learning. I'm definitely very open-minded, and I do some crazy stuff, quantum field and all this sort of stuff. So I think you can learn a huge amount, if you're open to stuff and you're not, because it's very childlike to go, no, this is the way I've always done it. This is how I'm going to continue to do it. And the opposite of that is to be open-minded and go, okay, if I have to run and flap my arms around, then,
So be it.
so be it. If it makes me a better runner, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that was one of the things, is that if someone came to me and said, yeah, if you do this, you'll be a better athlete or whatever, then I'd be all in for that, and all open to trying that at least and seeing what worked. So yeah, it's just being open to learning something new, and it all comes down to what the goal is. If the goal is to be better, then you're going to be, and you're willing to do anything to get to that point, apart from take drugs or anything like that, then you're open-minded to it, and okay, let's give that a go and see if that's going to work.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's true for every area of life, being open to a different way of doing it. Like you said, we've got this childlike way that, well, this is how it's always been, and keep doing it. And we take that through into so many areas of our adult life, and just doggedly stick to things, when really, if we're more open and more curious, and we'd get different results.
Oh God, I've forgotten what we're saying now. Yeah, so the whole curious thing, like there's so much of the world that we don't see. There's so many countries that we don't go to, and there's so many different things that we don't experience. And I think that's one of the things, in terms of growing up in Zimbabwe, like I did, is that we tried lots of different sports for a start to see what you're good at.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that they don't do in this country, and that needs to change. In the school system, we're all just lumped together and you just get on with it, but we're also individual. And we've all got our unique properties, and we're not all the same. That's the reality. And it's just about being curious about what's out there, and there's so much that we don't explore. There's different cultures, there's different different languages, there's our history, there's our ancient history, there's all these things that just come into our lives, or that can mold us and change us and that sort of thing. And it's just being open to all of that, and just being, what's it going to take for me to operate at a higher level, because that, to me, that's what it's all about. It's about operating at the highest level you can, because that's when you can achieve so much more, and you can have a better human experience.
I love that.
Different levels.
Yeah, better human experience. So good. Now, there will be people who are listening to this that have had their mental health challenges.
Yeah.
Can you give some advice or thoughts on coming out of depression?
Yeah.
And then how to then keep moving forward? Because sometimes it's like you come out and suddenly it's fresh air, and it's like, well, now what, right?
Yeah. So for me, it was understanding. So there's two sides to depression. There's short-term depression, which is based on your current circumstances, and then there's long-term depression, which is based on an event a long time ago, which you're still living in. So I obviously had long-term depression, and really it was that understanding that it was a sense of powerlessness caused by me as a child growing up. Because my mum said I had those depressive kind of symptoms when I was 4 years old. So I literally spent my entire life depressed on and off. But when you understand that, so it's all in the understanding and the awareness. So when you understand that, it's like, okay, that was the situation. That's how I felt. But that's over now. Because even though I moved continents, my brain didn't put two and two together and say, well, you're okay now. You're on your own path. It's still, my brain was still in that same sense of powerlessness. And then it also concretizes what's going on around you. So you'll be in an environment where, I don't know, a client may not pay you, for example, and you go, and it's a big payment, for example, and you go, well, I just feel depressed, my life's over, and, I failed, all the rest of it. You just go back into that default kind of depressed feeling.
Yeah.
So really it's that understanding, and I think the biggest thing as well is about that you are responsible for your own life. So no one is coming to save you.
Yeah.
You are the creator of your own life. So everything in your life so far to date, you've created. And moving forward, so understanding that basically I'd had a bit of a shitty life, blah, 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 and that had carried on. I had created that. So like, okay, well, if I've created that, then I can create something nice for myself.
Yeah, I love it.
I can create something that I love. And that's where I'm now at, is about creating a life that I love and going after that. And it's that responsibility. So you're responsible for yourself, and you've created what you've created. The past is over. So it's very important to understand that the past is over and there's nothing you can do about it. And, and I liken it to you drop a plate on the floor and it breaks. You can't unbreak the plate, it's broken.
Yeah.
So, you can try and glue it, but it's not going to be the same. So it's like, okay, we move forward, and it's just about moving forward. Yeah.
Go on.
So the other big thing for me as well was, through the training and stuff that I've done, is about being comfortable with my thoughts, and that in itself is so empowering, because I think so many people struggle with their thoughts. The reality is that your thoughts and feelings aren't real, so you make them up as well.
Yeah.
What's worse is that the thoughts and feelings that you think and you make up then creates your reality. You've got to be careful about what you think about, because that's what you create. So there was a very good quote from Bruce Lee, where he says, "Be kind to yourself." Something around, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something around being kind to yourself, and don't beat yourself up, because when you beat yourself up, you're essentially telling yourself, when you say I'm shit and I'm this and I'm that, you're essentially telling your subconscious that that's how you are.
Yep.
So your subconscious goes, okay, well, that's how we are.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, no, I'm, powerful, whatever, then that's a whole different mindset, and that's what you then create. Because it's about negative self-talk, and negative self-talk is very, very damaging to ourselves. It's not, and I realize that as well with kids, especially. You've got to be so careful what you say to kids, because you say something off the cuff and that sort of thing, and that's them for the rest of their lives. Especially if you say it 3 times or a few times.
Yeah.
Whatever, that will go, okay, well, that's how I am. And then they discover it, when they're 50, they're like, oh, actually, I'm not that way.
Yeah. It's a big part of the unraveling process and the reprogramming process is learning just how many of those throwaway lines from adults created patterns in us that are still impacting us now. We talked about the thinking. Bob Proctor talks about how that part is the intellect that creates all the stories, but it's actually, if we go back to like the actual thinking, which is what comes from intuition or spirit or the universe or whatever, and being able to differentiate the two, that's where you get the real
so
co-creation, right?
Yeah, so for me, I've done a lot of work around using my intuition,
Yeah,
and that's instrumental in moving forwards.
yeah, yeah.
Um, for me, that your intuition is the first voice,
Yes.
that says something, like that's your intuition, and then your kind of human mind kicks in and goes no, and well, let's do this instead. So it's the first voice, which is your intuition, and it repeats as well. So if it gives you a nudge, it'll keep repeating the nudge until you do
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
um, so and that's been really instrumental in my training, especially in gym. So basically, I'll get to a point, and and I'll hear the voice saying you're done, and I know that I can be halfway through a set or whatever. I'm done means I'm done.
yeah,
So I will stop and I will walk out.
yeah,
And that's been really, really, really helpful, because
yeah.
otherwise I keep going and I get injured, and then, blah, 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 and off we go down the
Hundred,
same old routine.
100%. And whether it's training, whether it's sport, whether it's other areas of
Yeah.
your life, your ability to trust that message when it comes through and
Mm.
actually act on it. Because sometimes the message is telling us things that we're like, I don't think so. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't sound right, or it's too scary, or whatever. But you soon learn, the more you're able to trust,
Mm.
then the better the results that you get.
Well, we also overtrain, and I watch a lot of UFC stuff and that sort of thing, just because I love the mindset of those guys.
Yeah, yeah,
To go into the cage with someone who's going to like try and knock your face in, you know,
yeah.
it takes a lot of courage, to do that, and
Or crazy or something.
or something. I sometimes I give some of them too much credit, because I just like just go in there,
Yeah,
but that fear as well. A lot of people overtrain out of fear about, especially in a competition, like it's fear of losing, so they overtrain, and actually they actually cause their own failure by overtraining out of that fear of not training enough.
yeah. It's a fascinating space there, because it's like you hear some of the greatest athletes. Absolutely, they trained religiously, but I think of someone like, they talked about Shane Warne after he passed, and saying he was notoriously a bad trainer, and
Mm.
he didn't actually practice that much. And it's like that just goes against everything. But he was a genius.
He
So
was a genius, and that's the key. Is
yeah,
finding your genius
yeah,
in whatever it happens to be, because every single human being has a genius in them,
yeah,
and
100%.
it's about finding that genius, what you're good at, and when you find that, it's easy. It's not hard to
It's
do whatever it
free.
is.
It's free. It's
Yeah.
exhilarating. It's a level of understanding. Oh, that's why I can't do that. But
Mm.
that's why in these spaces, like, I come alive. And that's a great point. Also about everyone having one. Like,
Yeah.
not everyone's genius is leg spin bowling or
No.
cycling or whatever, whatever it
Yeah.
is. But there's definitely something there for everyone. And being open and curious,
Yeah. Exactly.
really, really big one.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned before, you're the creator of your existence, and
Yeah.
taking responsibility. Now, from my experience, that is quite confronting. I found that one of the most challenging things I ever faced, but also the most freeing,
Mm.
because it's like, what do you mean I'm responsible for all this shit that happened? Like, there is no way that I'm taking ownership of that. Then starting to learn that when you do, and you look at it from a different perspective, and it's like the word response, it's how are you going to respond?
Yeah.
And then you get your power back. Then
Mm.
you can actually, that word control that you mentioned at the start, then you
Yeah.
come back into a place of self-control. Whereas when you're continually making it other people's responsibility and placing blame and all those different things, well, you give your power to all those things that you're
Exactly.
blaming and you're
Yeah.
handing responsibility to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're giving your power away, so you're not in control.
Yeah.
So your life depends on their decisions, not your own.
Yeah, and it never should. And that, while it's confronting, it's just so it's so freeing. So if you're listening to, and you listen to that part and thought that was a bit far fetched, as I definitely did when I first heard it, and I imagine you did too, Colin.
Yeah.
It's work with it and just be curious around it and be open and see where you land. But it definitely changes so much for the positive. So I'm glad you mentioned that one as well. You mentioned earlier around finding that level of confidence.
Mm.
Now, confidence can't necessarily be created artificially. But from your experience, and if you take sport as the example, how have you found that you can boost your confidence through going through a particular process or by having a different way of thinking to be able to start improving how you perform in different areas?
Again, it's really down to structure. So it's whatever you've done before that to create the output of confidence. So if you've trained really well, over a long period of time, then you can be confident that you're going to perform a certain way. You can't control what the other guys are going to do in the race, but you can say, okay, this is sort of the time I'm probably going to do. But based, if in terms of mine type of racing, that's what I was time based. Obviously, from a triathlon, you're going kind of as fast as you can to the end. So you're capable of a certain performance, and I guess that, and that'll, whatever sport you're in, you're capable of a certain level of performance based on your training and based on how well you've looked after yourself and that sort of thing. So that's where the confidence comes from. And I think the same thing, even doing exams, you've studied really well, and so you have that level of confidence. My son's going through his exams at the moment and doing loads of studying and that sort of thing. And I'm like, you've got to be relaxed. You've got to get to that point where you've gone, okay, I've done as much as I can, and now I'm just going to relax and do the best I can, because you will never get anywhere if you're really uptight. And exactly the same in sport. You see it in fighting all the time as well. They're really uptight and they're nervous and they're like, and it just doesn't work. And that translates in life and everything. When you're uptight and nervous and all the rest of it, like there's no flow. It's not easy, anything like that. And that's really the goal, is to make it easy and playful and, be in flow. And that's when everything, and it's like, okay. And even if you haven't done enough training, and it's like, okay, well, or we've been sick or something like that. And it's like, okay, we are where we are. I can't train the day before and expect to get better, the day before race day, it's too late. And I think that as well, like, you're not going to get any performance benefit from training within the last 2 weeks of an event. So, that's all about sharpening and that sort of thing and keeping fresh. But you are where you are. Just go and enjoy it. And that's the big thing, is about enjoy what you're doing and just love what you're doing. And if you don't perform, it is what it is. You are where you are. You can't change it. And just try and set up better structure the next time, or train more specifically. Just have a more structured approach to what you're doing, and just be clever about what you're doing. It's not always about working harder. It's about being more thoughtful about what you're doing and be more specific and targeted. Yeah,
and to me, you can't overstructure. Like the more well, clean is the word that's come to mind, that you can be with your structure and know, well, hey, it creates certainty.
Yeah.
What you should be doing at any given time, what the next step is, how you're going to do it, all of those different things.
Yeah. It's like you go into a race and you know that, for argument's sake, let's talk about the Brownlee brothers or something, and he's like, I can run a 28-minute 10K. I know that only 2 other people can probably run a 28:30 10K.
This is after a swim and a ride?
Maybe 29 minutes, but they've run close to that. So it's like, but having that knowledge, it's not necessarily about the time, but it's like, okay, I know that I can outrun anybody.
Yeah.
So so let's just get to the run, whatever, and then we go for it, and we'll burn everybody off. But and that's that confidence going, yeah, I know that I can do that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, we just look after ourselves. We just make sure we've done all the right stuff, and we haven't overtrained, and we haven't tried to injure ourselves, etc. And then we can perform.
Yeah. You mentioned flow before. I'm glad you did, because it
Yeah,
was going to be my next question. Is that sometimes rare space that we find ourselves in the zone? It tends to happen a lot in sport.
yeah.
One of the real key parts for my confidence was learning how you can apply that same concept to the
Mm.
rest of your life. Do you have any tips for people, whether it's sport or otherwise, around how you access that flow state, how you've learned to access it?
I have to admit, I don't. That's something that's relatively new to me, and I don't think I've managed to really. I mean, with my work, I guess there's that trying to manage that ADHD side of me, and it's really about going. I think I break stuff down into smaller chunks and go, okay, I'm going to be really focused and do a 2 hour thing, and then I'm going to gym. So I break it down into smaller chunks and go. Then I can be really focused, and I can really get through a lot of stuff, and I know that at that time, then I'm going to go to gym and do that side of things.
Yeah.
And it's that breaking stuff for me, definitely, that it breaks it apart. It's like, okay, I'm going to gym, I'm going to do my thing, and then I'm going to come back, and then I can be focused again. That I can't, and I don't think many people can work an 8 hour day and be efficient the whole day.
No.
It's not possible, because
No.
we don't operate like that.
No.
It drives me mad when people have like 2-3 hour meetings. It's like everyone's bored and thinking about lunch and
Anything.
anything but what
Yeah.
you're talking about, and in a meeting that long. It's not possible to maintain that focus.
It's because it's missing structure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you have the meeting, and that's the same thing. Like, you have a meeting. It's going, right, we're gonna sit for an hour. We're gonna do X, Y, Z, and we're gonna have something to eat and a coffee break and everything else. And we'll sit, so it's that structure, and structure is what makes everything work.
Yeah. I don't,
And being, yeah. So yeah, it's just about being specific, which I think also is structure, but it's not. And I guess in the early days, I just go for a run, and didn't really know how. I almost like how far. I'll just see how I feel, and
Just
maybe I'll
ran.
do some hill sprints and everything else. But
Yeah.
if I'd had that structure, and that almost that training program going, okay, so I'm going to run every second day. I'm going to run 10Ks a time, and I'm going to do hill sprints once a week, and I'm going to do a long endurance run. That's that structure that sets you up to be successful.
Yeah. There's a great book, Steve Kotler's The Rise of Superman. Talking about looking at elite athletes and how they have just instinctively access flow states. And one of the
Yeah.
key things is exactly that you talked about, having that clearly defined goal.
Mm.
And without that, then you just can't access it. And I guess if you look at it from a sporting perspective, sometimes people get that clearly defined goal wrong, because it's all outcome focused instead of it being structure and process focused.
Yeah, I think the flow probably comes a lot down to loving what you're doing in the moment. So it's being in the
100%.
moment and going,
Yeah.
this is, I remember I hadn't done a triathlon for a long time, and then I did one. And I remember that the race started and we were in a lake, and I was going, you know what, this is what I love doing. I'm where I'm supposed to be, And I think it's just really enjoying what you're doing, and loving what you're doing. And then that's when you're in that. It doesn't matter about the outcome. It doesn't matter about winning, because you can't really. You can only do what you can do. If someone else has been training harder than you, you can't beat them, because they've been training in the background, and you don't know what they've been doing, or they may be more talented, or whatever it happens to be, or they've got access to stuff you don't, or something. But you can't control what they do. All you can do is control what you do. And the best way to perform and to be in that flow is just to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, I was talking to an old boss of mine recently. We're going to get him to come on here too, from when I was working at Fox Sports, and he talked about sport. Now, it's not a zero-sum game. Like you can't just always have a win.
Yeah.
Like you need to make sure that you're focused on the right outcome, and then just being able to detach from that outcome and be present as you described. To me, that's a key part of finding that flow in sport. I've been fascinated learning a heap more around flow in everyday life and the different tools that are available to help people find that. And it sounds like you're already well down the path on that by like what you described there is like finding what you love and what comes easiest, because to me, that's the easiest way to hack the flow state is like,
Yeah.
well, what do you do? Like, what do you do best? And for me in sport, it was like I'm the cheerleader, I'm the encourager. Like, that just comes easy to me, and I play better when I'm engaged in that way. And like, I don't know if you can relate to maybe if you're an IT, maybe your is more getting more of that internally focused for your flow.
Yeah, I think it's I think for IT, it's almost like thinking out the box, for a problem. When you come across a problem, is that it's not always what you see. It's something else which is affecting that's the result.
Yeah.
The problem that you see is actually the result. So you have to kind of unpick it and say, okay, what else has affected it? And often the problem has started somewhere else.
Reverse
And
engineering.
and that's had a knock-on effect, which is the issue that you've got. So
Yeah.
it IT can be really frustrating, it's not black and white.
You won't get an argument from me there.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more thing, Colin, before we wrap it up. You mentioned in your bio, you talked about how you got your dogs, and we've had some challenges with pets today. I think I'll mostly edit all of that, but cat and dog coming in and out of the doors. But you just talked about getting in nature and being with your animals, and just how grounding that is. And to me, that's such a big part of my mental health, my emotional health. To find that balance is to make sure I'm finding that time where I'm feeling grounded. Can you just maybe explain to people, one, how you do that, explain a bit more about what you mean by grounded, and how that's beneficial so they can apply that to their life as well?
Yeah, so I'm a massive advocate of going into nature and just being present in nature, because nature is where we came from. So our ancient ancestors lived in nature, and that's where we were designed. We were designed to live in a cave and run around and kill animals and do all that sort of thing. So that's our default. So by going back to our default, we go back to how we were supposed to be, because we come so far. We live in houses, and it's not recognizable how far we've come. So when we go back to that, that just grounds us back, and it just, you can never be bored in nature. I always found that, especially coming from Africa, you'd be in Africa, and I get bored easily, but I can be, in the bush or in anywhere in nature, and you're never bored, because there is just so much going on. There's so much for your senses going on. There's birds flying around, there's noises, there's, it might be water, there might be an animal that you think you can see. There's insects, there's just everything.
It's the essence of presence, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that, I even felt it the other day. We went out and just sat, because we actually moved to a place, to the little village, which is closed. It's got a reservoir at the bottom, and it's, there's forests there and everything else. And that was one of the main reasons we wanted to move there, to be closer to nature. And, we went down and we just sat down by the reservoir and just watched the birds, and, just sat there for like literally half an hour.
Yeah.
And walking back, I could really feel the difference that had made to me. There's that, because I think in life almost, and there's so much going on, that you're almost in that anxiety, stress, even when you don't realize it. Yeah. You're in that, there's, have you paid the credit card bill? And, someone's on the phone. Is that, there's all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And when you're in nature like that, there's nothing to do, there's nothing to be, there's no way to be, there's just It's just be in nature. That's all you have to do, and
Yeah.
just absorb what's going on around you.
So
And
good.
that is so like healing for your body.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't take long. You know, you can literally
Yeah.
be half an hour or something. You don't have to spend the whole day there. And it's just really healthy for you to do that.
Yeah. Body, mind, and soul.
Yeah.
You talked about like that constant state of anxiety
Mm.
and just on edge. Like
Yeah.
that really struck me when I left my last full time employment and went on a. We already had a long holiday planned, and I came back to have a bit of a farewell. And I ran into a co-worker from another team who was on the verge of retirement and had been thinking about it. And he's like, "What on earth have you been doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You just look so relaxed."
Mm.
And that was what he saw was a reflection of exactly what I'd experienced. And I've spoken to a number of people who have either had redundancy or they've
Yeah.
moved from, out of that sort of corporate space. Is you just don't realize the impact it's having until you remove yourself long enough to see what the difference is. And
Yeah.
to me, finding more space in nature
Mm.
is one way to access that without having to throw your career in, but
Yeah.
instead trying to make that more a part of your day to day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely just making it, just spending like that short amount of time. I think people, the whole corporate environment is very unnatural for human beings.
Yeah.
It's not how we were meant to be. Um, and I definitely think that, taking people out of that environment and putting them into nature, and maybe that might be for a few days or just like almost like a de-stress camp kind of thing, and just going, just take them out of that constant, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got an email to reply to, I've got to, all the stuff you've got to do. And then you go into nature and go like, there is nothing you have to do. Like everything can wait. There's nothing you have to do. And actually, like, that's almost like I've had that before, that you have such a down, from that high anxiety, you have such a massive dump where you go relaxed so quickly that you can actually throw up and be sick,
Yeah, right.
because it's so dramatic, the difference.
I haven't experienced that, but I do know that when people go on holidays,
Yeah.
they often get sick,
Yeah.
whether it's
You often
throwing
get
up
sick
or
because you can't afford to be sick, because there's always, so your body's like on the edge waiting.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, just give me the time so we can actually just be sick and get it over with and repair whatever we've got to repair, because you
100%.
just don't have the time to.
Yeah, so you go through some sort of cleansing process, and
Yeah.
whether it's coming out a part of you,
Yeah.
or like your nose starts running,
Yeah.
or fever or whatever, because it's suddenly become safe. And I also think that's part of the grounding process, is that
Mm.
you go to another country and you can't help but create a shift and find more of that grounding. And
Yeah.
rather than having it being so abrupt where you go on holidays and you feel like you've ruined your holidays, it's like, how can you start bringing more of that grounding and presence into your day-to-day life is really important.
But I think you've got to be careful about the kind of holiday you go on, because I think if you go on a holiday where you're just drinking and eating food and like having a party thing, and I know it's age dependent, but
Yeah,
that's not really going to help you to de-stress. It moves your stress into a different thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it moves it sideways. It doesn't get rid of it.
And it's like, I used to be, okay, we're on holidays, we've got to go like do stuff. Where it's
Yeah,
like, no, it's quite the opposite. Okay, you can do some activities, but just need to slow down and
yeah,
just decompress. So good. Hey, Colin, you've authored a couple of books,
yeah,
and you're doing some. Not only do you work in IT, but you're also doing some coaching around helping people in
yeah.
that space that you've experienced around PTSD and finding more balance in their life. So share a little bit about that and where people can find more of your work.
Yeah, so yeah, just getting into coaching, just talking about really what we've been talking about, and just helping people understand what's going on for them, and helping people find their genius. That's what I love doing as well.
Yeah.
Um, and just having these really great conversations with, and just getting people just to kind of understand what's going on for them, and really just it's understanding that they're responsible, and going, okay, now what are we going to create for you, like, and finding out, because people don't always know what they love. So it's
Yeah.
going through a process of finding out, and accessing their own intuition and finding out what they love. My books have been on like security and cybersecurity, and running a business and that sort of thing. Writing another book now, which is more based on my story, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and just speaking a lot about the stuff that we've spoken about. So so that's my next book, which I'm working on. And yeah, I just love the writing. I think that's part of my genius as well, as that writing. Um, and it's really, that's the other thing as well, is that we do a lot of things which we need outside validation. So you put a post on Facebook or on social media, and you go, well, if I don't get 1,000 likes, I'm going to feel really bad about myself,
Yeah.
and that's a big problem that we have, I think, is seeking outside validation. And it's like, it's not about you, it's about the message. It's like, that's the message, and I think a lot of people will see your message, not say anything, but it will positively affect them. And that's, you do a lot of that stuff, that great post that you put out, and it's like, your job is to say the message, and then whatever other people do about it is up to them. But
100%.
it's doing that because you love doing that, not because you're trying to get validation. And I've done a lot of stuff based on validation.
Oh, same. Yeah. And I know the difference. And I actually got a half-written post that I'm going to put out this morning. Often people are projecting what's going on for them, and it's like, no, like that's not actually helpful. And it's just a validation piece. And it's also, well, what you described there is some of the posts I put out that doesn't get as much traction. I know that it's probably hit the mark, and people don't necessarily want to engage because they've read it and they've taken what it is. And here's a real interesting marketing hack. I just put a picture of my wife in there somewhere, and it seems to get about 3 or 4 times the traction. So,
don't you hate that?
Oh man, demoralizing.
Yeah. But yeah, I speak to lots of people, and they're all like, yeah, we read your posts every day. It's like they never like it or anything else. But yeah, it's just about the message. But yeah, my website's colindurrance.co.uk, and yeah, it's just about, I've been through the journey, and I've come out the other end, and it's, it's just that knowing that there's a better way, and sticking with it, and then finding something that works for me. And I know everyone's different and stuff, but just, it's just finding that stuff that works, and it's so life-changing. And you just have a better life, and you have a better relationship, and those people around you have, you can help them more, and they have better lives, and it's win-win. That's what I call it.
I love that. And that's, and that's why, like, I love getting other coaches on here, because I'm not going to be for everyone, but there's so many different ways that you can find your answers if you're open and you're curious. And I think, like, if I look at what you've talked about today, a lot of it's been about that self-knowing.
Yeah.
And the more you can understand yourself, and like, there's so much peace in understanding. Like, when you just realize, oh, okay, that's why I'm like that. That's actually okay. Like a diagnosis, like you said, ADHD, like different elements of that, where you go, oh, okay, well, I don't have to be so harsh on myself here.
Yeah, 100%.
I can get an understanding. And so I thank you for sharing so openly that all that you've learned around knowing yourself, finding your genius. And also there was a lot there for people that could relate to the suffering, putting themselves through suffering, and the overthinking part. I'm going to have to dig more into that, because I think you're on a real good point there, is like how many people are actually just numbing themselves by.
Yeah, a lot. There's a lot of There's a lot of man-made distractions out there. Your phone, social media,
Yeah.
Move. And the problem is that all these entities, companies are trying to distract you. They do everything they can to distract you, to keep them on their platform, etc.
Of course, it's a battle for attention. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Colin, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Ian. Really great. Thank you.
The biggest lesson from that chat with Colin for me is that sometimes the suffering becomes comfortable. And I wonder if you can think of those moments where you've been stuck in a cycle just because it's comfortable, and the uncertainty of what might be on the other side is actually worse than just staying where you are. You'd be a high achiever, you'd be pushing yourself beyond the limits plenty of times. It's certainly something I've experienced. It's why I do a lot of work now helping people to avoid burnout so they don't have to go through that pattern again. If you'd like one really simple resource that can help you start making the changes that you want to make so you don't get stuck in that same place of comfort and suffering, send me an email and I will send that resource straight to you, info@ianhawkinscoaching.com. Simple process to help you start making those changes today. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.